I'm Alexander Freeman, and this has been Remaking Normal. Episode 5: Love, Sex, Desire, Queerness, and Disability. Today, I'm talking with disability awareness consultant and the chief disability officer and co-founder of Bumpin, a sex toy company for and by disabled people, Andrew Gerza. Andrew uses they, he pronouns and identifies proudly as disabled. Their work has been featured on BBC, CBC, Daily Extra, Gay Times UK, Huffington Post, The Advocate, Everyday Feminism, Mashable, Out.com, and several anthologies. He was the subject of an award-winning National Film Board of Canada documentary, Picture This. Andrew has guested on a number of podcasts, including Dan Savage's Savage Love and Cameron Esposito's Query. He has spoken all over the world on sex, disability, and what it means to be a queer cripple. Andrew, it's great to have you on the show.
Alexander, it's so great to be here. Thank you for having me today.
How do you define normal?
I was thinking about this question before we came on today. It's so funny because when we're younger as disabled kids, and you and I have the same disability, our CP is different for each of us. It's like the way that when you're younger and someone says, "Oh, I wish you were just normal," it's like, but I am. This is my normal. Like me sitting in my wheelchair and needing help with most of my day is a normal thing I go through. So it's not that I don't use normal, but I don't necessarily connect it to my experience because my experience is what it is. And so I don't always, and I feel like that word is used against disabled people in so many ways sometimes. So like I feel not weird about that word, but just I don't use it every day because one day my normal could be this and one day my normal could be a hospital visit. So like, who knows?
Can you tell me about your life and your disability?
So I live with spastic quadriplegic CP, which I feel like you also, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like we have the same disability. And I think from knowing you a little bit, I think I know, I gleaned that information. For me, I need a lot of care in my day, so I need help with everything from getting up to using the bathroom to having a shower. So when people say my disability doesn't define me, I always kind of giggle and go, that's great. Mine totally defines who I am. And it defines my energy level, and it defines what I can do and can't do, and it defines my whole experience. Like when we were setting up to record this episode, we were going to do it last week, and I think I had to email you and be like, something came up, God, I can't do it, so sorry. Like, my disability impacts every piece of what I do every day. Always having to reschedule or change something or move something or somebody, and like it's so hard when you because I work in freelance, so when you do it, when you're your own boss and you miss a day of work because your body said fuck you, like you got to find a way to make that up, and you got to find a way to like still deliver the things. But also as I get older, doing freelance consulting and stuff, I'm learning to be a lot more gentle with my body and just be like, oh yeah, if you need a day off, if you need to be sick, that's okay. Like all of that is okay. It'll work itself out.
How do the queer and disability communities overlap for you?
For me, the queer and disabled communities overlap. Well, I wish they overlap more. I'm very queer and I'm very disabled. Both of those things are very true. But I find that a lot of queer spaces are not accessible. So if I want to go to like a queer nightclub or a queer dance party, a lot of them don't include accessibility for me. I'm often not like my needs are not included in these things. And then sometimes when you go to disabled spaces, they're not very welcoming to queer folk. Well, not most of the time they are, but sometimes I've been to events where it's like, oh, I'm queer. Oh wow, there's no one knows how to navigate that with me. So I wish they overlap more because there are so many queer disabled folks that intersect with queerness and disability all the time in the world, and I wish there was more overlap. So I mean that's why in 2015 I ran the world's first queer disabled orgy was what the press called it. It wasn't an orgy, it was like a sexy party. But press ran with it and called it an orgy. So we had people from all over the world, like in a sexy party with disabilities, showcasing disabled people being sexual, which is really cool. But I wish there were more queer spaces that were accessible. Oh yeah, it was so fun, and I like it was 10 years ago now, and I wish that we could do it again. And like, hey, if anybody wants to hire me to throw a disabled sex party, I'm right here. I'll do it. Sure.
Can you tell me about the sex party you did?
The party happened August 14th, 2015. It was 10 years ago now. It was a long time ago. And some disabled friends and I just decided we wanted to throw a sex party. And none of the venues in Toronto where we hosted it would, like, we talked to sexy clubs and sex clubs, and they were not accessible. So one of the members from the sex club said, well, why don't we talk to some of the theater spaces? And we asked one of the theater spaces in Toronto called Buddies in Bad Times if they would throw it with us. We paid a deposit, and so we had people from all over the world coming to this party, and it got leaked to the press here as a disabled orgy, which it wasn't. It was just like a sexy party where if you wanted to have sex, we had accessibility for that in the club. But we had folks from like from Florida who flew down, from the western part of Canada. They came. We it was so full the night of the party that we had to turn people away. So we were so proud of that, because it showed that disabled people having a space to be sexual and sharing in their sexual liberation with each other was okay. And I mean, there hasn't really been anything like that since we did it, but I'm still so proud of what we did. What happened is we rented out a theater space, and we had attendant care available. We had Hoyer lifts available. We had a bed available if people wanted to partake in that. And it really, it was less a sex party and more of a sexy party where if you wanted to have sex, that was available to you. So it was really just a big dance party where like you could make out with a bunch of hot disabled folks, which is really kind of what we wanted. Of course, the press calling it an orgy meant that the whole world thought that we were having like this raucous sex party, which I mean, I hosted the night, so I didn't have sex. I was too busy running around saying, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you. So I definitely didn't have sex, but it was really cool to be in a space with hundreds of disabled folks and non-disabled folks dancing and flirting and really showcasing disability in the front of like a sexy club night, which is so rare for disabled folks to be the focus of that. There was a lot of dancing, and we wanted to ensure that you could have sex with whoever was there. Obviously, we also made sure that consent was a big part of what we did there. So we gave people wristbands, green for go, yellow for like caution, and red for no. So that obviously before you just talk to somebody, kind of knew what they were looking for, just to give people an added layer of comfort in those spaces. But I don't, aside from one friend of mine that I think did have some sexy times with somebody, I don't really think that anybody necessarily had sex. It was just a space to explore sexual expression of disabled folks, and I am so proud of what we created there. From what I remember now, it was 10 years ago, so it was a little bit ago. But from what I remember, we had folks. I think they were a sexual therapist, possibly, or possibly somebody that worked at a sex shop, come and talk during the night about what consent looked like, what was comfortable, how to do XYZ. And then we also had, like, mixed in with that, we had performances. I remember getting a lap dance from a stripper. Like, it was a little bit of everything, but it was a lot less quote unquote dirty than I think the press wanted it to be. Everyone that came to the party was aware of what we were doing, and they were either fully dressed, some were partially dressed, and some decided to. I don't think that there was anyone that was entirely naked at all during the night, but everybody was aware of what was happening, and there was we allowed partial nudity and whatever made somebody comfortable, that's what we strove for. And I remember getting getting a lap dance from a stripper. That was fun. Like, it was a really good time. I think a lot of the people at the party at the time brought their own caregivers, so they already had a level of comfort with the caregiver to say, "I need help with this, I need positioning," that kind of stuff. If we were to do it now, I know there's a service in Toronto now that's trying to get off the ground that provides on-demand attendant care, and I know that they would probably help us, but we would always make sure that the attendant and the people helping felt safe and comfortable. We would never put an attendant in an uncomfortable spot, or a disabled person in an uncomfy spot. We really strove to make sure that everybody was comfy with what was happening. If there was another party, how do we make it happen? We need funds and money. That's the first thing, because when we did the party back in 2015, none of us got paid. We all did it for free, and we all did it because we believed in what we were doing. So this time, now that I have 10 years of working under my belt, I'd say, please pay me for it. I'm not doing it unless I get a big fat check at the end. Two, we need a venue that was accessible. And this is the trouble, because even in a big city where I live, like Toronto, we had trouble finding a venue that was comfortable exploring that. So when we went to the theater space, they were very open to the idea because they already did theatrical productions that included sexuality and nudity sometimes. They were very open. But it would be about finding a venue and then making it and then promoting it in a way that was. I still struggle with remembering that they had called it an orgy, a disabled orgy. It got so much press that shock morning shows were calling us in the morning and making jokes like, "Oh, how do you have sex if you're in a wheelchair? Do you bump your joysticks together?" Like, those kind of silly jokes. And it's like, I remember like being on those phone calls and trying to be professional and polite, but thinking, wow, these people are real assholes and they don't get the value of what we're trying to do here. So if we were to do it again, I'd want to scale it down and make it less provocative. And also, like, I'm 41 now, so I'm old now, so I definitely would want to scale it down just a little bit and make it less about like, let's fuck, and more about like, let's just be in a space together. And then of course we want to make sure that there was attendant care and disabled folks and all that kind of stuff.
Tell me about your company Bumpin. What is the story behind it, and what kind of toys do you make, and how can they help the disabled community?
So the company was called Bumpin. I was the co-founder along with my sister in Australia, and we started the company in 2020. Now the company is defunct, so unfortunately there is no more toy to speak of. We had issues with when it came to manufacturing, and just costs were hard, and she was running it from Australia and I was trying to help from here, and we reached a point where actually bringing the toy to market was going to cost us more than it would recoup. So we have the design ready to go, and if anybody wanted to come in and give us $1 million to actually make the thing, we'd love that. But realistically, in the climate that we're in, that's probably not going to happen. We, however, are so proud of the conversation that we started around that toy, that people were really interested in doing it, in purchasing one. And I wish that I could say that we could bring it to market, but just the reality of being a small startup. And then we started right in the middle of COVID when everything was like popping off and everything was really hard to do anything. So I'm still so proud of what we did. I'm also proud that I co-founded the company with my sister. Whoever thought that they would run a sex toy company with their sibling? Probably no one. And I'm so glad that we got to do that together, because it brought my sister and I a lot closer than we were before. And it helped her understand from a non-disabled perspective what it's like to be disabled and try to have a sexual life. So I'm really proud of what we created. We also curated a book from 50 authors around the world called the Bumpin Book of Love, Lust, and Disability, that tells sexual stories around sex and disability. And so the conversation that we reignited around sex and disability is one that I'm forever grateful for, even though the company and the toy is no longer. The toys we were selling, we had one main toy, and it was called the Bumpin joystick, and it looked like a cross between a body pillow and a toy holder, I guess you could say, like a plastic piece that held a sex toy. And basically, the idea was for somebody with limited dexterity, like we have, you could hug this joystick. It was like a big joystick. You would hug into it, and you could put your favorite sex toy inside the holes, and it would hold that in place while you self pleasure, masturbated, and inserted something in yourself if you wanted to do that. And so it was really a toy designed to use with the toys you already had on the market. And then we had plans to build our own toys, but again, with manufacturing and money and all the stuff that goes into building a company, we just had to let it go.
How does society limit the idea of who gets to be desired?
Well, I mean, look at our media. It's mostly white, able-bodied, thin or muscular people. Even if we don't include disability right away, people of color are not included enough. Trans people are not included enough. Like there are unfortunately and sadly enough there are unwritten rules on who's allowed to be desired, and it's never the other, it's always the popular, and unfortunately that falls on white able-bodied folks, and the rest of us get kind of pushed to the side, and I see that in my communities that I'm a part of. Queer communities are so white and so able-bodied, and cis, and I'm a non-binary person, and so like I feel like we have so much work to improve desirability around disabled folks. Like that's why I love the work that you're doing to show like, hey, I can have relationships, I can get married, I can do all these things, and that's so important.
What's one misconception about disabled intimacy that frustrates you most?
What's one thing that frustrates me about the way people see disabled intimacy? Well, it frustrates me that I'm not even really given a shot. So when we think about disabled bodies, we don't think about them as being lovers or sexual beings at all. We discount that, and that's really frustrating. So when it comes to dating or intimacy or sex, a body like mine and a body like yours is not given the first crack at the apple. We're not given the fruit. They're not like, wow, those disabled guys are so attractive, I'm gonna go say hello. We're usually not we're not even counted, and that really frustrates me. They don't see that I have the ability to be a good lover, a good friend, a good fuck if I want to be. And that's really frustrating for me.
What is sex like for you?
Well, as I've gotten older, I just turned 41 this year. So sex for me is a lot less about like, we got to do all these positions, we got to try all this stuff, we got to do all these things, and way more about like, let's just spend time together and see what happens and go with the flow and be with each other and our bodies, however that is, that's how it's going to be. And I have the privilege of working with sex workers here in Toronto when I want to have my needs met. So I don't really enjoy dating or doing all that stuff just because of the ableism I've experienced. So when I want to have sex, I'll hire a worker that I know, and I'm lucky enough to work enough that I can have some money for that. So for me, I see that as a therapeutic practice, just like we go to OTs and PTs for other parts of our body. I go to a sex worker and a body worker for my sexual needs, and I really appreciate that I've cultivated a relationship with a few workers in the city that I'm comfortable with, and they're comfortable with me, and we can have great intimacy. And so it's much less about let's have sex, let's try all this stuff, and way more about let's just be together. And so sex for me has become a much more intimate practice than I think people expect. When you ask a question like what is sex like for you, I'm sure people were expecting like, oh yeah, we tried this position, we do all this, but like that's not always realistic for me. And so my experience of sex is much more about getting to know the person I'm with, getting them comfortable with disability, and showing them that I can give pleasure just as much as the next guy. Working with a sex worker is, for me, has been a really valuable experience, and so I remember hiring my first worker probably 10 years ago because I wasn't meeting people, I wasn't getting laid, I wasn't doing all the things that I wanted to do. So I just hopped on a website and said, I want to see what's out there. And I kept coming back to this particular worker and I reached out and just said, "Hey, I like your profile. Have you ever been with a disabled guy before?" He said no. And then we've started an 8-year friendship and working relationship where he's my primary sex worker. And so I was very nervous the first time that I hired him. I was very uncomfortable, but we got to know each other and we kind of, as with any relationship, whether or not it's with a worker, we just got to know each other. And now we see each other once every few months when I'm able to afford it because it's not cheap. And I, I want to make sure that my workers are paid fairly and rightly because I think it's a job. And so I do it when I can. But and in Canada where I live, it's legal to be a sex worker. It's not legal to pay for a sex worker. So it's a very gray area of like, yeah, so I'm basically breaking the law whenever I want to have sex. But it's fine. It's a very gray area. So you just kind of, we don't talk about those parts of it. And you just say, "Oh, I'm helping a friend. I'm helping somebody with whatever." And I threw them $300, no big deal. And it's not like the cops have come and busted down my door and said, "Oh my God, you're hiring a sex worker? Oh my goodness." Like, wow. But it's something that if you have the means to do it and to hire a body worker, I would highly recommend that you try it out. If you are wanting to learn more about your body, wanting to get more in touch with your intimacy, are frustrated with the ableism you're experiencing when you try to date, I highly recommend it as something to see it as something that's less like, we always have these misconceptions of sex work as this dark and seedy thing. It's really not. The last time I had a sex worker over, we watched an episode of Bob's Burgers and fell asleep together. So anyone that's worried about like it's this dark and scary thing, it's really not that, at least not for me. And so I've been very lucky in the people that I've met and worked with to cultivate a team of like sexual heroes to help me get my needs met.
Can you tell me about your experiences with the sex workers, and where can others find sex workers?
I'm sure there are other websites. I wish I could give you more of names of them. But I don't frequent those ones, unfortunately, so I don't have any intel for you there. But really, I mean, if you look up body worker in your city or sex worker in your city, surely something will come up, because not only do we look for providers, but a lot of disabled folks need to do sex work to make enough money to be okay. And so a lot of disabled folks are also sex workers. Yeah, I know a few disabled folks that do cam work, sex work, just to make ends meet in the crazy capitalist hellscape that we live in. It's sometimes called body work, sometimes sex work. It depends on the area you're in and how much you want to tell the Google machine that's listening to you all the time. Sometimes it's body work and sometimes it's sex work. I like For me, I like body work and sex work because I think they're both valuable. But like I said, most of my sessions are, do you want to watch Bob's Burgers and make out? Like that's so this whole idea that it's this dark, seedy thing, it's really not.
Can you share a moment when you felt fully desired? And what made that experience different?
Yeah, I can share a moment when I felt fully desired and what made the experience different. I filmed an adult film with my one of my sex workers, John, in 2019 for an adult male website, and we got to work together. We had been having sex as client and worker for 2 years at that point, and we filmed for a little studio in my bedroom where we got to film me being transferred from my wheelchair to the bed together. We got to film making out in my wheelchair, and I felt fully desired because I could be fully disabled with him in that moment, and I could show the viewers of that film that a severely disabled person like you and I can totally be sexually desirable. And that was a moment that I will never forget because I worked with my friend and sex worker to cultivate the scene and show like, okay, I want the audience to see me in my wheelchair. I want the audience to see you getting me out of my wheelchair. I want the audience to see you undressing me and positioning me and all the things that we had to do to be together. It was so valuable for me. And that was one of the few moments in my sex life where I felt entirely at ease with being a severely disabled person and being totally desired.
What would a truly accessible conversation about sex and pleasure look like?
I could sit here and talk about all my feelings with it for a whole other hour. It really depends on, I think, the person that we're talking about. And so for me, what makes the conversation accessible? Like this is an accessible conversation about sexuality and pleasure. Just being able to talk about it and say, guess what? Like, there are people in the world who would look at you and look at me and assume that we couldn't be dads, we couldn't have kids, we shouldn't have kids. And then when it comes to like being able to talk about the fact that we're both sexual beings and we want XYZ, like those conversations between disabled folks, just saying like, hey, I'm a disabled dude, you're a disabled dude, guess what? We have sex. Like that, those conversations never happen. Being able to be in a space where we can say I'm a sexual being, that's what I think is truly accessible. Having more spaces where the idea that a disabled person having a sex life is not so scary, that's accessible.
What is your advice for others and your hopes for the future?
My advice for other disabled people is to be as disabled as you need to be every day, all day. And my hope for the future is that disabled people who cannot work and cannot enter into capitalist systems get and maintain a livable benefit system and a livable wage.
Where can people go to reach out to you for your services?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm so glad that we got to talk today. People can find me on Blue Sky at andrewgerza.bluesky.social, whatever that. I'm on Blue Sky under my name. They can also find me on my website, andrewgerza.com, where they can book me. I do speaking gigs. I just wrote a book, and so I talk about that all the time. You can find me there. You can buy my book, Notes from a Queer Cripple, wherever you get books. It's available now. And I'm also on Instagram, just doing stuff for the gram under my name as well.
I'm Alexander Freeman, and this has been Remaking Normal. The people you'll hear on this podcast and the stories they share remind us that normal isn't a rule to follow. It's something personal, something evolving, something we create every time we choose to be real. If you've been inspired by these conversations, make sure to subscribe to Remaking Normal wherever you listen to podcasts, and to the Outcast Productions LLC YouTube channel for films and more. Follow me on Instagram at @RealAlexanderFreeman. You can also visit myownnormalmovie.com to learn more about my documentary My Own Normal, and explore outcast-productions.com and consider working together on a film. Thank you for listening, for feeling, and for being part of this journey. Together, we're remaking normal.